Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our reaction and review for the Fall of the House of Usher, Episode 8, the finale. We are here to quote the Raven, nevermore. Not really nevermore here because we got a lot to talk about with this just fantastic end of the show.
Yeah, they stuck this landing. Like when you get a show that's like so good and you're just like, oh man, I hope that they're able to stick the landing
Yeah.
where it's not going to end up like Dexter, where you're like, really? A lumberjack? I went through all these seasons
Yeah.
for this. I know it's only a limited series, but it's been so good and such a good ride that I was just like, can it really end as well as this whole season has been? And it absolutely did.
It managed to not only conclude, I think, the Usher family story in a way that made sense, but also it's like grand tribute to Edgar Allan Poe. There were some more great little tidbits spread throughout this final episode.
Mhm.
Even the simple things, the way that they continued the shoot, just the Raven itself in the finale, and we saw this at the start of it. It was so cool the way that they did it, where it's like the Raven is menacing, but at the same time not too menacing.
Mhm.
It was never cheesy. They managed to really frame the horror aspects of this show and in this world in a way that made sense for the tone. It never got too campy. And despite all these people being horrible, I still cared. I was still really invested in this world.
And I like that they actually explained everything. They didn't make it where it's kind of like up to your interpretation. Oh, we're going to be, clever about things. They really gave solid answers that they stood on. And I always appreciate a show that does that.
Yeah, it's so easy to feel good coming out of this incredible season. And if you want to make us feel good now, be sure to hit that subscribe button because coming up, I know the Fall of the House of Usher is done,
Mhm.
but there is still so much incredible television that we're taking on here at the channel. I mean, we still have the end of American Horror Story Delicate
Mhm.
Part 1 to get into, and then American Horror Stories, the streaming based spinoff on Hulu, is coming very, very soon.
Yeah, and for anyone out there who enjoyed Silo, which is one of, the better shows that was released this year, Beacon 23 is also coming up in November, and we're going to be covering that here at the channel too. So hit that subscribe button and stick with us.
Okay. So I think we all kind of had a large sense as to where this was all going at the end of this. Like, there was no way that Roderick Usher was ever going to end this show alive. I just think that the way in which they explained it and us finally getting answers on Verna's deal in a way that made sense, that was the thing that was really satisfying as we kind of understood just how terrible Roderick really was.
That whole scene where they were sitting there with Verna talking it out, I was so happy to see it and that they took their time with it. This was a very like put together scene where it was like, here's the deal, Verna's offering them success, riches, no consequences, nothing will ever come to them, but and they'll live, their lives throughout. And then when it comes to Roderick, when it's his time to finally die, his whole bloodline is going to die with him. Where she's making it feel really sweet, where it's like, sure, your kids could live until 70 or 80 and struggle their whole lives, or they could live until 40 or in their 50s and have like really wonderful lives and have rich lives. What is better for them? What do you think is a better life for them? But of course she's not revealing that they're going to die in really horrible, painful, like some humiliating kind of ways.
This is where I think things get really, really interesting to me, is because we now understand that this deal was in place and that the death of all of his children was inevitable, or was it? Because we had her say throughout the entire season, I'm going to give you these choices, and you made these choices that put you in this position. So to me, there's one or two things going on here.
Mhm.
Either these choices could have potentially spared the children and she wanted to give them a certain element of free will, but I'm not sure that's it, because if that was the case, I think Lenore certainly didn't deserve what happened to her. But
No.
the other thing here is that maybe it is a I'm giving you a choice. If you make the wrong choice, I'm going to make sure that your death is as terrible and awful and painful as possible. But if you are a better person and you make good choices, then maybe your death is peaceful to a certain extent.
What I found the most interesting about this sort of deal with the devil, that we all sort of see the devil as someone who's collecting souls, and that
Yeah.
that's the thing that the devil wants. And Verna's like, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in taking what you love. That's the riches that really matter, like your heart more than your soul. Where she's kind of like, that's not really a thing, but like, I want to take the thing that matters the most. What do you love? What do you covet? You know, money is nothing, soul is nothing, but what do you love? I was just like, oh, that's so dark. And it was interesting too, where Madeline was like, I knew what the deal was. So I just didn't have any kids. But
Yeah.
you went and had a pile of kids. Why would you do that?
Because he's a terrible person. Like, he is one of the worst characters imaginable.
Yeah, I mean, he even admitted in this finale that he knew that his success was going to be built on a pile of bodies. He knew it.
Yeah. And he didn't care because he cared about the money. He cared about the notoriety. He doesn't care what happened to his kids. The moment he made this deal, he ripped what little bit of his heart was out of his body and basically just gave it to Verna at that point. And it was already starting to decline, but because we had already seen everything with Rufus, we already knew about Annabelle Lee. Like, there wasn't much of him left at that point, and so he gives her whatever is left. He doesn't care about his kids. It doesn't seem like he's ever had a loving relationship with any of them. Many of them didn't even know him for years.
Yeah, that was an interesting line too, where he was talking to Augie and he was like, yeah, the child that I'm the most like is Tammy. Like, she outsourced her intimacy, which we had seen all season. She was completely incapable of having intimacy and had to have somebody else do it for her, where she could sort of watch a version of herself having intimacy with her husband, and she's just unable to have it. And Roderick had it at one point, but he completely lost it along the way, where he was also unable to have intimacy. I had always thought, and I still feel this way, that he's actually the most like Vic. I think he's more like Vic than he is like Tammy, but I think that that part of Tammy is definitely part of Roderick as well, because learning what happened with Annabelle Lee, where he ends up getting all these riches, and he's, so upset that Annabelle Lee left him and broke his heart and didn't stand by him after what he did to Augie, and sort of that, betrayal that happened, that Annabelle Lee was just like, you're not the person I thought you were, and I have to leave. That then Roderick comes in and throws money at his kids and takes them and turns them into these empty vessels as well. And without the kids, Annabelle Lee just couldn't go on. And it's so heartbreaking of what Roderick did to her.
She was such a innocent and I think good person within this world of really bad, horrible people who are doing these things that are completely self-centered. And Roderick, I don't think he ever viewed Annabelle Lee as that much of a real person. He keeps repeating the Edgar Allan Poe poem, and I think a certain part of his head, he had built up this like idealized version of Annabelle Lee, where she was just sort of this part in his play, and he could sort of direct her to be whatever he needed her to be, and that she would just be there as a sort of great love, but he never understood that she has, self-sovereignty as a person. And after what he did, that idealization was gone from her head. Like, she started to realize, I have to exist more as my own person. I don't want to be a part of this world, this romanticized version of life, this poem that he kept reciting to me. It's gone. And it's so sad what happens as a result of that. He loses, I think, so much of what he has left of his humanity, but he doesn't have anybody else to blame. He made the decision he did when it comes to Augie. He has made the decision he made when it comes to the deal. He made the decision he made when it comes the Rufus. And the question, and we never really get a full answer to this, and I don't think it needed to be hit this like on the nose. How much of this was really worth it to Roderick Usher? Like, did he get anything he actually wanted out of this deal?
Yeah, especially since, I think after what happened with Annabelle Lee, he thought he was never going to have a love again, someone that was his real like heart and soul and everything. And then in comes Lenore. And I think he never expected to love somebody as much as he loved Annabelle Lee, because we know with Juno, it wasn't about love. It was about the pill. And with Lenore, it was just pure love. Like his granddaughter just loved him and he really loved her. That I think when he made this deal, it was like, okay, whatever's going to happen to my kids is going to happen to my kids. And he's having these kids all over the world he doesn't care about. And then, yeah, in steps Lenore. And his whole life just really changes when you become a grandparent. I've heard this from
Mhm.
lots of people that become grandparents. That's just like, of course, I love my kids. I'm so invested in my kids, but it hits different when your grandkid comes in.
Mike Flanagan, you brilliant man. Okay, you named the finale The Raven. Lenore is a main character in the poem The Raven. How he managed to tell and sort of spin the story of The Raven, sweet Lenore is like that phrase is mentioned in the poem, and the Lenore the character, she has that sweetness despite like everything that is dark and twisted that is going on around her. They're able to sort of use that as a basis for this episode, but wrap it in all this other just like really dark and twisted stuff. So Roderick, the main character, the vessel for Poe and a lot of this story, like he is so haunted. And by the time that he realizes, okay, here is Lenore, this like good person in my world of darkness, can he really be there for her? It's nevermore. You've already done it. You've already wasted it. You've already ruined it. You have made it so that her life is a nevermore. She's never going to get a chance to live it, and it is all your fault.
Yeah. And I mean, and she's such a strong character too. Like it was so good seeing her go up against Pym the way that she did, where she gave her statement to the cops. She told them everything. She told them
Yeah.
exactly the truth about what happened to her mom. And Pym was like, listen, like, you're a minor. I wasn't here. No adult was here with you when you gave that statement. I've had them rip that up. This is the statement you're going to give. And her basically telling him to go, kick rocks and flip flops,
Yeah.
and then walks back to the cops and is like, I'd like to give another statement. I was like, oh, that is so chilling. Wow, like amazing. I absolutely love that. And they really turned Maury around for me as well, because if you've been watching our other videos, I don't think she deserved what she got from Frederick. It's not for him to decide
Mhm.
what her punishment is for her choices. Frederick was 100% in the wrong.
Yeah.
However, she did make choices that were a huge betrayal against their marriage, and she suffered for it. She ended up at that club with Prospero with her intentions of what she was going to do, and she ended up in this acid bath, and she's paying for her mistakes.
Yeah.
But to end up hearing when Verna is sitting down beside Lenore and is like, this is the part of the job I take no pleasure in. I don't want to be here. You don't want to be here, but this is, where I have to be and this has to happen. I need you to know that your mother is going to go on to do great things and, help people and change things for people. And it's all going to be in your name because, of how much you loved her and helped her and were able to get her to this point that she's able to make a difference. That was a nice turnaround. I really like that.
It showed Lenore's impact, and I think moralistically the impact of what being good can do for somebody else. Because while Frederick was being Frederick and doing all these terrible things to Maury, here was Lenore trying to help her, trying to care for her.
Mhm.
Like that memory is something that she can really hold on to, and I think it starts off this road to redemption for her. And I'm glad we didn't really see it. I don't think we have to see it. I think just
No.
knowing that it's there and that exists, that is really meaningful.
The same with Juno, like learning after everyone is gone that she ends up inheriting a lot of this. I guess Tammy's question at the beginning of like, Juno has a prenup, right? She's not in the will, right? Like, no answer was ever
Yeah.
given on that. So clearly she was in some sort of way because she inherited pretty much everything and just liquidated it and started putting it towards like helping people through addiction, which was like, again, amazing that she got through all of this and was able to make a difference.
It's like they at least gave us these little glimmers of hope for some people. So it's not like this entire world is not all bad. It's just the Usher family is all bad, and maybe some people associated with them are too. And I think I just want to take a moment here to give some applause to Mark Hamill because I think he really disappeared into this role.
Oh,
And Pym was, I mean, Pym was despicable. He was just such a complicated character, but I never once watched him and I was just like, oh, it's Luke Skywalker, or oh, it's the voice of the Joker, or all these other things that Mark Hamill has done. Like he blended in and he played this role like so well, and he's really one of the only few like non-Usher constants that we sort of have here who isn't married to any of these people but is still very entrenched in their world.
this is one of the best roles Mark Hamill's ever done. He completely became this role for me. I didn't see Luke Skywalker at all. He was just Pym. Like he was amazing in this. And his scene with Verna too was really incredible. Like for him and all the things that he's done and all the things that he's seen. And Verna
Yeah.
was even like, I've seen what you've seen. We've seen each other before. Like, I know what you've done and I know what you've seen. So I'm going to offer you this deal because Camille has files on everyone, including you, and she hasn't even scratched the surface of you, but the files she does have will have you in jail for 20 years at least. The end of your life you'll spend in jail. So I'm going to now make you a deal. And I wasn't sure what he was going to do. Because, I mean, Pym has done some pretty bad things. I mean,
Yeah.
he was there. He just wrapped her up in plastic and was ready to just have her carted off. So I was like, he would probably take this deal. But when it really came down to it, where she was like, I'm not here for your soul.
Yeah.
I'm here for what you love. What do you have that you love that I can take from you? And he's basically like, I don't have anything. Like, I didn't make those connections. Like, a lot of my life and what I do wasn't going to allow for those connections. I didn't want anyone to have that type of leverage over me. So, no deal. I was just like, oh, that's really interesting.
It is. It's really fascinating. And I think him coming to this conclusion himself and also being like, I'm going to control my own fate.
Yes.
Even Pym, who is definitely not a good person, he still found a way to separate himself from the Usher family at the end of the day with that, where he's just going to take whatever punishment comes his way. And that's going to be different for him at the end of all of this. But this, I think, entire finale, it was longer than the other episodes it needed to be. I can't sit here and say that I feel like they left anything on the table. Like they even wrapped up
No.
Rufus Griswold.
Yes, I love that they actually showed us everything that happened. And I'd been theorizing through many videos now that Roderick, when he was going to the basement and he was talking to the wall, that was where Rufus was, that they had walled him up. And they did. So after the victory and, we've got Roderick, he's the king, and Rufus has told everybody he's the next. He's my right-hand man. He's going to have an office right beside me. We are partners. I've told the board, you're it. That they were like, perfect. This is all worked out. We still need a fall guy, though, because, everything else is still going to be investigated. So, Rufus, you're going to be the fall guy. We're going to wall you up. You're going to look like you disappeared. You took off. You're going to take the fall for everything. You've already laid the groundwork that Roderick's going to be the next in line.
Yeah.
Perfect. You're going to pay for it all. It was so well done. Even with that little last brick that was in there, that's just like, you are so small.
I love that.
I was like, ooh, and put the mask on him.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
okay, there's a few moments in this finale that will stand out to me a lot. The "You are so small" message, one of them. The end of Madeline Usher. Ironically, this is what I wanted for Maury. I said that a couple of the videos ago. I wanted like zombie mummy Maury to like come out and take out Frederick.
Yeah, I mean, but this is exactly what Verna had said when Roderick had, taken those pills. And she was like, no, 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 no. Into the world together, out of the world together. And that's
Yeah.
basically exactly what ended up happening. We saw, him take her eyes, Madeline's eyes, gave her the poison just like they did with Rufus. He took out her eyes. He put in, the sapphires, which is, again, what I had theorized was going to happen. I thought that she was going to be walled up in the basement, and that's why we heard all this like
Yeah.
banging and clanging, that he had taken her eyes so she couldn't see what was going on, which is what happened. But she wasn't walled up,
Mhm.
and she ended up basically coming back from the dead exactly like her mom did, to take down a powerful man
Yeah.
as the whole house comes down on them out of the world together. 10 out of 10. How
It
amazing.
was so cool and scary. Like her with the eyes was actually scary. Like that was one
Oh
of the.
yeah.
There were a few jump scares throughout this season, but the finale really achieved like some of that in a way that the rest of it didn't. But a couple last Poe references here. We have Augie Dupin actually quoting a little bit of the actual House of Usher story close to the end of this. We also have a little bit of the poem "Spirits of the Dead" kind of at the very, very tail end of all this. Like I was sitting back at this, and I have stated from the mountaintops my love for Poe's work throughout like all of these episodes. But I was thinking, could Netflix do something like this again, where you take a poet, a short story author, and like kind of come up with an amalgamation of all their different work and put them into a story? But the thing I kept coming back to is I don't know how else you would do this, because there's not really a lot of other writers that have like this wide a breadth of material that is also this similar in tone. Because you think about like, if you're gonna do the Lewis Carroll story, so much of it is gonna be about like the Alice in Wonderland universe.
Yeah, and it has to be popular, especially if you're going for something like poetry, which is, not popular for everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm not someone who consumes a lot of poetry, but at the same time, I know who Edgar Allan Poe is, and
Mhm.
I would know some of his poetry or stories or whatever. But, if I'm naming another poet, the only other one I can name is Matt Roast. And
Thank
that's
you.
because I know you,
Thank
right? So, but like outside of that, Edgar Allan Poe is the only other one that I would actually be able to name. And I think that that's for a lot of people out there that are not into poetry, you know who he is.
Yeah, I really just feel like this show is a celebration of Poe. I don't think that they're, doing anything that's like tearing down his work. I think he always meant for things to be in this sort of tone. And I think it's just also beyond just the literary part of it. It's just a really great 8 episode horror story. Like you don't need to know the source material to enjoy this show. You just see great performances, people who I think really enjoyed what they are doing. I really hope that this becomes like a massive hit over the next couple of months. Like this was just such a thrill to dive into.
It was. And that ending with Augie going to the graves and being like, hey, you thought you were the richest man in the world. You're not. I'm the richest man in the
Mhm.
world because I get to go home to my husband, my kids, my grandkids. It's all about love and losing love and taking away love and keeping love. Like, that's what was the most fascinating thing for me. And I kind of wish that I had known more of that or picked up on that throughout the series more, that's what Verna was really after, was taking away love, that it wasn't about souls.
Mhm.
It was about what is the thing that means more than anything else in this world, and it is having love, people you love and people that love you. There is nothing that matters more than that in life. And if you have that, you are the richest person in the world. And it was nice to see Augie have that win.
All of this just means we got to rewatch it now. With this in mind, I would eventually watch this again because it was
I'll watch this again.
so great. And we really love and appreciate you guys for hanging out with us through this entire journey of the Fall of the House of Usher. It has been a thrill to cover. hit that subscribe button because we do have so much other good stuff coming up. Just mentioned Beacon 23 earlier.
Yep.
American Horror Story Delicate is still going. This is going to be a very busy next couple of months of content.
Yep.
Thank you as well to everyone who has supported us over on Patreon.
Yes,
We
thank you.
appreciate that so much. We'll see you guys here next time.